This is starting strength coach Byron Johnston, and in this video, tips for bracing and leg drive during the bench press. Because we're lying down on the bench during the bench press, it's not uncommon that the majority of people's focus goes into their hands, arms and chest, and they start to associate the lower body, the legs and the feet with being in a more restful posture. This idea that the legs and feet are in no more than a resting position during bench press can go on to create some problems in the correct bridging and bracing that we would like to use in the exercise. To confirm, you should be actively engaging both the legs and the feet throughout the bench press, and later in this video I'll go over the correct way to do that. When we do not have the proper use of the legs and feet in the bench press, this can go on to create a couple of problems. The first is that when the legs are left in this resting position, there is no drive going upwards towards the shoulders. Consequently, the support and the bracing is not there to maintain the bridging up position of the chest, and you'll often see that the lifter goes flatter against the bench. Now, this can be a problem because if the back becomes flatter or completely flat against the bench, it moves the angle of the chest out of the correct position to perform the bench press. The second kind of problem that we see on the bench press when the leg drive is not being used properly is that it creates a kind of a toggle on-off effect with leg drive. So once the weight gets heavy enough, the lifter will feel that the legs need to do something, and on some reps you'll see them trying to switch the leg drive on. It creates a kind of a toggle on-off of pulsing effect where they're trying to bounce the bar off their chest and at the same time then disengaging the leg drive. So now we have an inconsistent pattern on and off with the leg drive, and it looks like this. Now there are problems with this pulsing on and off of the leg drive. When the leg drive is on, it can have the tendency to bounce the bar off the chest. Also, when the leg drive is on, if it's done aggressively, in other words, if it's a heavy rep, you may find that the bridging leads to the hips, to the butt lifting up off the bench and losing contact with the bench altogether. And then, for every time the leg drive is temporarily off, a little bit of tightness and bracing is lost in the upper body. And this will start to affect the position of the upper body in the shoulders against the bench press, which must be held consistently throughout the lift to do it properly. So now, to correct those problems, let's go over the correct positioning of the feet and the use of leg drive in the bench press. So the first thing to do is to plant your feet flat against the floor with the shin pretty much vertical and straight down, putting the heel just about underneath your knee. Now, you may have seen people setting up with the toe end of the shoe against the ground and the heel of the shoe elevated off the ground when they're applying leg drive. It's recommended that you don't do this because we found that this can promote the hips lifting up off the bench and losing contact with the bench when applying leg drive. So keep the shoe flat against the floor. Now, if you're training in a gym where the type of flooring doesn't give you good traction between your shoe and the floor, then one tip is to take an exercise mat, lay that out on the ground, place the bench on top of that, and then place your feet on top of the exercise mat. What you should find is that you get much better contact and leg drive when you put your feet against the mat and apply the leg drive. Now, the job of the leg drive is to support the bridging up during the bench press. And that means that when you apply force against the ground, we're looking to push back. Don't interpret that as pushing the hips upwards, because again, we don't want the hips to leave the bench, but also be careful that when you bridge back in the direction of the shoulders, that you're not aggressively doing that in a manner that shoves your entire body up the bench. We don't want to lose the positioning that we take when we set up underneath the barbell. So sometimes here I will cue the lifter to just switch the leg drive on or keep the legs active during the bench press if I think they may overdo that and push themselves backwards and up the bench. Now, if you're finding that despite being careful with the leg drive, that you're still experiencing some movement between your body and the bench, a little bit of slipping, then there's a couple things you can try here. First of all, if you're on a wooden bench, wet a little bit of the back of your shirt, and that will help with some traction there. If you're not on a wooden bench, but you're wearing the kind of shirt that is a synthetic material that can be quite slippery, then here you can either switch to a cotton shirt Or take a couple of resistance bands and apply them lengthways against the bench, and that will provide a good gripping surface in the same way that we use the technique with the mat to keep the feet in position at the toe end of the bench. I hope you found these bench press tips useful. For more information, videos and articles on strength training, head over to startingstrength.com.